Stop it. Stop it. Don't be weak.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
We are in very serious trouble.
Look, Jeffrey Dahmer was eating the shit out of niggas' heads.
He's the one.
Okay, so I rewatched 7 Pounds, a movie that I had seen a few years ago, but I just suddenly decided to rewatch it for some reason. I had heard a lot of things about it, and I had originally liked the movie a decent amount, when I was about 15 or so, and after rewatching the movie, I started to realize a lot of things about it that I didn't know before. And I think in a lot of ways this is shown kind of the ways that I wouldn't necessarily say grown in terms of like how I watch movies, but just like how I know more about movies now. I just think it's easier for me to see behind the curtain and kind of see like what a movie is trying to do in certain ways to like get a certain reaction. When it comes to this movie, a lot of the criticism that I've seen is that it's very emotionally manipulative, and I agree with that. Now, every movie is manipulative in some way. When you see a movie, it is trying to evoke a reaction out of you. That's the point, right? It is film is a emotional experience. It's or it's an intellectual experience, right? Like it's trying to create a world very meticulously, and so the idea that it's manipulative is not inherently a flaw. I think the flaw comes when the movie is so obviously manipulative, when it doesn't feel organic, when it is just trying to make you emotional. This movie, I think, falls victim to that. There's just so many scenes that just feel so overt, right? In the way that they're trying to make you cry, right? Like the acting is so intense. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel natural. And I do think that the acting is good in the movie, although there are a lot of very Will Smithy looks. You may know what I mean by that. Like he has this face, you know what I mean, where he's just kind of like he has that face in a lot of movies, and he has it in this movie. But I do think that he's pretty good in the movie. Rosario Dawson's good in it, and Woody Harrelson's good in it. I mean, I think the acting is probably the strongest thing in the movie. But again, the movie, it is pretty emotionally manipulative. There's also like some weird direction in the movie. I feel like there's like some like horror moments in the movie. There's like a tracking scene where you're kind of following Will Smith, and it's kind of like scary, like for some reason. And I didn't realize that when I watched it before, but like now it's like this is like really strange. Like it's like unsettling. Like I don't know what they were going for. It just feels very like tonally inconsistent in that sense, because he just kind of comes out of nowhere, and then it's like unexplained. It just doesn't really fit the rest of the movie. And speaking of like creepy, Will Smith is like incredibly creepy in this movie. Like he's just like watching people, and it's really weird. It was kind of funny just how goofy he was. He not like intentionally, but it was just like he's just watching people in the background, and I mean, this movie is so close to being a horror movie. If you just like sit back and rewatch it, like he's kind of like stalking people, and he's like looking up information on them without their knowledge, and I don't know. It's just just looking at it like that, I think it's really funny. I think though that the biggest issue with this movie is that it takes too long to reveal Will Smith's motivation. We don't understand even what he's doing until like halfway through the film, or even later than that. Like we don't even understand like what he's doing. We don't understand why he's doing it. And so like we're just seeing a lot of things happen, and we don't know why they're happening. And so it's really hard to like get emotionally invested in someone where they're like cursing out like a blind man, and like how am I supposed to feel about that? Like I don't know. Like what's going on here? Like I don't understand it, and I just feel like the movie could have been so much better if we understood what was going on more in the beginning. Like they set this movie up like a mystery. Like his motivation is somehow like this thing that we're supposed to figure out. Like I don't know why. You know, that completely undercuts the whole movie to me. Like I don't think it works well at all in that sense because the movie is basically it's trying to make you emotionally like connected or empathetic with him without giving us any reason to be, right? He's just, you know, they're giving us the payoff, but they're not giving us any build up. And that makes the movie really hard to like to watch and really hard to understand because I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. Like we don't know what actually happened until so close to the end of the movie that it just kind of is like now okay, this is what I was supposed to feel this whole time, right? Like I probably would have felt a lot better about it if you know if I had known from the beginning or at least a lot earlier what he's doing, right? Because like I said, as it stands, it just feels like a collection of sequences. Like he's just going around helping people and that's it, right? Like we don't understand his weight. And I think you know another thing is just we don't ever I just don't feel like we ever get a good sense of like how he feels, right? Like yeah, they kind of talk about it a little bit, but like I just don't feel like we really sit with him and understand like his depression, his like how he feels about it. Just like we don't really get the weight of it from his perspective of just like how much this has affected him and just how sad he is. I feel like there could have been a lot of visual imagery with that and like you know I feel like Will Smith could have done you know more with that because I think you know if they did want to go with like how they kind of did go, if they just wanted to go stronger in this direction, Ben could have been a really interesting character. You know, he could have had this kind of messiah complex, or he could have you know he could have been more like okay, I'm gonna save you because I have the power to do so. Even though he's kind of trying to help people, they could have made him more arrogant about it, or they could have made him more of like a compelling character because he's kind of just someone who just helps people, and that's kind of it. But they could have made his character like way more interesting because I think there was a lot of potential for him to be really interesting. You know, he could have been. You know, there was a moment where he decides, oh, I'm not gonna actually give you any bone marrow, right? And I think that could have been like a really interesting thing to explore because like the idea that he can just give someone hope, and even though they did something that he deems kind of disrespectful or demeaning to another human, the idea that he can just take away his promise of life to that person is kind of messed up, I think. And it could have been really interesting to explore like the psyche of someone who feels they can kind of promise to help someone and then just take that away, especially with something as monumental as living, right? I think they could have done a lot more with that. This movie feels like like Crash to me, right? In a lot of ways, in a lot of the ways that I've been talking about because Crash had this very similar feeling with it seems like it's trying to say a lot of things, but it just doesn't do it in the right way, whether it's through the structure or it's through being too emotionally manipulative, like in a direct way, you know, whatever the case may be, but it just didn't really work for me in that sense. Another consequence of it just being structured in the way that it is or just revealing information in the way that it does is that you know just so many of the relationships I just don't really feel like the best friend character who kind of has to go along with what Will Smith is doing. We just I know the film wanted us to feel that a lot more and the actors are really in on that, but it just doesn't click, right? And I guess the reason, you know, to me is just that we don't know the relationship at all. We just kind of we're thrust into it after he has already decided to do this. And so we don't we understand that like it affects these characters, but we don't really know why. And I you know, I just think that it could have been done a lot better, you know. And so when I think about this movie, I think that it had a lot of potential and it's wanted to say a lot and it could have been very good. And I can see why a lot of people do like this, right? Because, you know, if you don't see it as very emotionally manipulative, right? Or at least in an overt way, I can see how you can really enjoy this, like how this movie can really make you feel empathetic towards these characters because the acting I think is really good. And you know, me, I can really feel that, right? But when I like actually examine the movie further, it just doesn't I just don't think that it really holds up as well past the acting. You know, I think that there's a lot of music scenes where a lot of music choices where it's so like blatantly trying to make you sad, and it just I don't know. I just don't really like that. You know, I wish it was a little more subtle because this movie doesn't have any subtlety. I think, but I don't think this movie's terrible. I mean, I've said a lot of bad things about it, but I think it's pretty competently made. I don't think that like there's not a lot of technical issues. I think that the acting is pretty good and everything, but again, I just don't think that it was able to really say things in the way that it wanted to, and I don't think that it was able to accomplish the thematic goals that it wanted to. But it's a solid movie, and if you're able to connect with these characters, I think you'll really enjoy it. But for me, rewatching it, it kind of soured my opinion on it. So, I don't hate this movie, but I don't know if I'll watch it again. So for £7, I'm gonna give it a 5. The movie was well made, decently, but there was just like a lot of emotional manipulation in a way that was just too overt. It felt too preachy. It felt too direct. It wasn't very subtle. But yeah, that's my review of £7. Thanks for watching.